I was reading this article here, and in this article it said developers are out of business in a few years with this Gen AI coming up. So I'm really wondering, is that true? What do you think?
I think Gen AI, especially in the tech industry for developers, architects, all the technical people, I see Gen AI being used a lot. I use it a lot myself as well. I think it's something that we cannot go around anymore, right? So I've been using it for over a year now. I think this is the future, but will it replace developers?
I don't know. Maybe we should invite a guest.
Yeah, let's do a podcast about how AI is assisting or maybe replacing developers.
Let's do it.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.
So with us today we have a guest, and it's April Edwards from GitHub. April, hi.
Hello, hello. How are you?
We are fine, I think. Still, we are still doing fine. We still exist as a developer. So hopefully
Yes,
you
you're
can.
still here.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully you can help us bring a little perspective in our future.
I'm happy to help. Happy to help. So, the question today is AI going to take over the world and take over all the developers' jobs, right?
That is the question. But maybe you should first introduce yourself.
That's a good idea. I'll ask AI to do that for me.
Yeah.
No, but really, my name is April Edwards. I'm a senior developer advocate at GitHub, and I've been at GitHub for about a year now. And prior to that, I was working at Microsoft as a DevOps practice lead, working in engineering, and worked in the cloud space since 2012. So it's been fun. It's been a good journey, and yeah, I'd say my career is absolutely pivoted with the introduction of AI. Pretty much everywhere we turn.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think? Do we still exist in a few years, or is it something that is really, yeah, well, declining and then will be obsolete in a few years' time?
I definitely don't think we're going to be obsolete. The world and the economy is changing, and it always has. I mean, let's think back to the days of cloud. When cloud came in, we kind of thought we're all going to be out of a job. When virtualization came in, we all thought we're going to be out of a job. When containers came in, we thought the exact same thing. And yet here we are. There's been a transformation. So we are still going to exist, and we still need the humans. The humans make the decisions. The humans are there to do the architectural design, to make the decisions, outline the path forward. But AI is here to help us be faster and accelerate our delivery a lot more. So there's definitely a double-edged sword to it, but without question, it's there to assist us. And I think very explicitly with GitHub Copilot, they named it GitHub Copilot because it's your co-pilot, it's your pair programmer, it's your rubber duck, and that's explicitly what the messages they wanted to get across to everyone.
Mhm. So if you mention rubber duck, so what do you mean by rubber duck? I have this impression of this big yellow thing in my office that I talk to once in a while and gives me an answer. But how do you see that with this AI thing?
I kind of have the same visual. So I'll talk to my dog, my giant yellow rubber duck, and ask it questions. So I think especially in the world of asynchronous working and remote working, right? All of us are sitting in different countries right now, and yet we're working together. And when we work asynchronously, often we can get our head down and focus, but then we need help. How do we get help on solving a problem? You might go to your favorite search engine or whatever. So it's something I learned in engineering years ago was having a rubber duck. I would phone a friend. I would call them and say, hey, so and so, I have a problem with X. Would you mind helping me out? And sometimes someone just providing clarity or a different viewpoint would get me to the answer that I need to get to in my code or my problem, and I would get unstuck. So your rubber duck is someone you could just bang ideas off of, speak to, and hopefully unblock you from whatever problem you have.
Mhm.
Yeah, I see it almost in the same way. I described it earlier as having being doing pair programming with a junior expert programmer, right? So it's still junior because it can make rookie mistakes, but it has also so much knowledge about everything that you can ask it all kinds of questions, right? That does not relate to your junior developer who might only have a small limited scope of what they know, but they have the knowledge of a senior, but then they act more like a junior, uh, giving you some examples that they found. And That's the level where we are at this moment, I think. But
I think it's improving. It's
yeah,
definitely improving. I think it's an iterative process. Same thing as we do in DevOps and DevOps practices. We ask it a question, it gives us an answer. But same thing as if I would ask either one of you a development question, I would consider your answer. It might not be correct, or it might be a path to getting to the correct answer. So it's very much help, but it doesn't always solve every single problem. And then you can't always, I don't want to say trust, but you need to test the output.
yeah,
Same as you'd write any line of code, right? You need to test your output and test what code you've written. So it's very similar in that sense.
But as it gets better and better, don't you feel or fear anything that in a certain moment in time, if it gives you from the 10 questions 10 times the right answer, like maybe the 11th time you just say, okay, well, good. You don't validate, you don't test, you just, well, hit and run.
You know, I think we've all been there as rush developers, and that's what's written either bad code or put bugs in our code. And we still need to test. We still need to vet the answers. Um, AI has boundaries, and we're still figuring it out as the human race. We're still figuring out boundaries of AI, and we're testing it. But we are feeding the models more and better information. The models have kind of had limited access to data,
Mhm.
which is why their output hasn't always been 100% accurate, and we're improving that, and there's been a lot of effort to do that. But I think you still have to take that output and test it, and as a human we have to drive the car. We have to tell Copilot the direction of where we want our code to go, what the end result is, and we still have to architect the solution. AI can't do that. AI can take learned practices and patterns and output that for us, and hopefully it's either best practice or close to it, but it's still pretty imperfect. And as it gets uh, better trained, it's not a sentient being. It can't think on its own. So it needs us to tell it where to go. And it's if you're using GitHub Copilot today, open up GitHub Copilot chat, or and ask it, like, you can ask it to explain the code, and it's taking the context of what's in front of it. But if you then ask GitHub Copilot chat to say, make me a cup of coffee, or should I have a cup of coffee, it cannot make those decisions, and it doesn't have any emotions. So it can't even tell. It's not capable of telling if something is good or bad or happy or sad.
hmm
It doesn't have what we have as humans. So it lacks a lot of what makes us human.
Yeah.
yeah, and also looking at code, it's more than building software. It's more than just writing some code, right? It also has to fit into the organization that is in the end going to run it. So, looking at Conway's law, your architecture is always going to match how your organization is being set up. So Copilot does not know about how your organization is set up. So will it match those kind of things? So currently it's often working in a very limited scope of the application, right? Like maybe some classes or some files around there it can make the changes, but not zooming out and looking at what business problem are we actually trying to solve here, and is this feature actually the right answer to solve it? Because that's the first question that developers should ask themselves, instead of just, oh, this feature is on the backlog, let's start implementing it. Are we actually doing the right thing here? And that's stuff that a copilot does not do. It helps you solve specific questions that you ask it.
Absolutely. And we're conscious that customers have asked for more specific responses. So Copilot, when it started, while it's been immensely successful, has had limited capability into its answers. We have now put forward with the new Copilot Enterprise the ability to index your code and your repositories so that Copilot can use your context. So a lot of customers have specific practices and patterns, or even niche languages. Customization enables Copilot to reference your own code base and not just potentially public code or other coding examples that the models were trained on. So it's getting better, absolutely. But yes, as humans, we still have to drive it. We still have to give it the context. We still have to architect it. We still have to give it the design. And ultimately, we're still in control. So if Copilot gives us an answer that we don't like, and we know that maybe is incorrect or isn't what we want, we can absolutely decline that. We don't have to put it in our code.
Mm.
So we have that full control still. It's giving us literally code suggestions, and it does also give us reasoning as to how it found that answer. And sometimes Copilot isn't always reasonable, but it does give you a reason, and it does give you that answer.
So Okay, so that is actually a good thing. So we are not going to be obsolete, in your opinion. So that's great. But then maybe a slightly different question. Do you think that engineers, developers, technical people that work with code or alike, that don't use an AI will be obsolete in the future?
That's a great question. I see a lot of organizations asking their developers today to use it, but they don't have to use it. It's not really a requirement for their jobs. It's, hey, we want you to use this. We want you to measure the impact, meaning, let's say it takes an engineer 5 hours to complete a task, and with Copilot, they can do it in 30 minutes or an hour. That's a several hour time saving.
Hmm.
And it, there's still questions around adoption without question. But we give people the opportunity to enable it. We can't just force it on you. We are seeing a lot of organizations that are using Copilot for the hiring process. And you
Mm.
think, well, why would they do that? It's like when you were in school using a calculator to find the mathematics answer. They want to see how you use Copilot in the interview because they want their engineers to use it in their day-to-day coding. So we're seeing a lot of customers integrating that into their hiring process, integrating it into their development process day in and day out. And they're not penalizing developers, but they're trying to incentivize the ones that are using it as to why they should use it. And I think some of the biggest things are a lot of the impact that we see customers measure is taking off those menial tasks that we have as a developer, repetitive tasks, the
Hmm.
boring tasks, the things we hate doing. Why are we doing it when actually AI can do that? That frees us up to be more creative, more proactive, and to actually help us be better developers because that's why we started writing code and that's why we got into tech was to be creative and fun. And when people start seeing that impact, we see a higher rate of adoption, and customers love it, and also the developers are a lot happier. And to be honest, everyone wants to be happier in their job. Nobody wants to do the same stuff every day,
Hmm.
the dull, boring stuff. We didn't take a job because we thought it'd be dull and boring and we'd be doing the same thing day in and day out.
Mm.
Yeah, so reading between the lines, if you're not using any type of AI in your work as a developer now or in the coming years, you will get blown away by all all your peers who are using it. As you said in the example of a task that normally would take 5 hours, that's being done in 1 hour. You can't keep doing these kind of things in the workplace if all your peers are running twice or thrice as fast
Yeah,
as you are.
yeah,
Then
exactly.
there's no place for you anymore.
Now,
Uh,
I think you can very much compare it with, I don't know, technologies in sports or something. Like if you use the technologies from sports 30, 40 years ago, you can be a great player,
yeah.
but then you will lose because all the
Yeah.
technology advancements, if you put a racing bike of 40 years ago against a racing bike of now, yeah, well,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to do anything with your muscles, right?
Exactly. It's you can buy speed. I think also, we see it a lot with the cloud too. When people go to the cloud, they take in their old ways of working. And I say old, their traditional ways of working, especially in the DevOps space, when we talk about automating
Mm.
things and doing things more of a cloud native way. And we see a lot of customers that literally lift and shift to the cloud, into Azure, AWS, GCP, whichever cloud you prefer. And they're they're taking their old ways of working. They're deploying stuff point click. They're making a lot of mistakes. They're literally, we call it click ups, right? They're pointing, clicking. They're not using templates. They're not automating. And when you start scaling that out to not just one or two resources in the cloud, but hundreds or thousands, mistakes are made. They're hard to manage. And customers come and say, oh, this is unruly. We see a lot of people in the tech industry getting pushed out by cloud only because they're unwilling to learn and to grow and adopt new practices. And this is the exact same thing with AI. And what we're also seeing too is you think of, we use the phrase developer, but someone who writes code, someone's a programmer. We're seeing a lot more of an adoption in the infrastructure as code space, in
Mm.
the IT operations space. So it's really starting to help others in those spaces and not just your traditional programmer.
Yeah. So I think that it's more like more an AI assisted professional than more like yeah, well, an AI coder or something.
Absolutely. And there's the capabilities are increasing. And we're talking about tech and as a developer, but let's scale this back to a lot of the features in Copilot. Copilot is also helping us summarize our code. So taking notes and writing documents. We have the capability with GitHub Copilot today to summarize a pull request. And and how I might summarize a pull request will depend on how much time I have to write that pull request. I might be really rushed to get a feature or a pull request in, or I just use terrible English when I write it, and the next person that picks it up to do the review goes, "Oh my gosh, what did they just write? What does this pull request do?" And it takes them hours to review all my code or what have you. So we're finding other ways to improve the communications and the development process, not just actually sitting down and writing code, but how we communicate. We've also embedded Copilot into security tooling, and it takes that security process off the developer, that strain, that time consuming practice of finding, let's say, passwords in our code, right? We're embracing Copilot in a lot of different ways.
Mm.
And what I see as well is writing code or building a feature within an application. It's not only writing code as we discussed earlier. So what I see about the people who are quite skeptical about using these kind of tools is they ask it one question and they get some code as answer, and that's like, yeah, that's not the way how I would like to write this application. But yeah, it's it's based on one question, right? So having a conversation, providing more context, um, that helps in getting better and better results, and it has to learn about that as well. And so knowing how to ask it such tools the right questions will significantly improve the type of results that you have. So I think, yeah, developers need to learn to use these tools as well. It's not something that you just get. You can get the best results on day one. I think I compare it to like using your old search websites on the internet. When
Mhm.
I try to find something on the internet, I get far better results compared to my mother, because I know how
Yes.
these things work, and I know how to prompt it, how to ask the right questions. And I think that that's the same way with Gen AI tools that help you build code or write some text. When you ask it the right questions, give it the right context, it gives you far better answers. So people need to invest some time in learning those kind of things as well.
Yeah, and we call it prompt engineering because we have to title everything in tech and give it its
Yeah.
own unique name. We call
Mm.
it prompt engineering. So it's asking a question and then trying again, trying it a different way if that way didn't work. Of course, you're probably going to give a better answer than Copilot half the time, but with AI, trial and error, absolutely. The other thing that we also recommend to people when they're trying to adopt AI is form a community. Do like lunch and learns or little group sessions and have people give input, create a maybe like a Slack channel or Teams channel, talk about where you're successful, where you're not,
Mm.
because people find new ways of working that they can share, whether they're junior, senior engineers, but then also you learn to prompt what works. And then with Copilot specifically, we've put in, I call them slash commands, where you can, instead of saying, can you please write me a unit test? I can do slash test and will write unit tests for me and give me code coverage, which I may have not had before. So some of the context and the exactness which we need to ask AI to do things for us is taken away by having shorthand commands or
Hmm.
summarization
Mm.
commands, which is really helpful because again, we all speak different variations of English. So the way I might ask a question could be in American English, British English, or if we're lucky, I might be able to ask it in Dutch.
Mm.
And that is just very different. And AI will pick apart those three different ways I ask a question very differently. So using the short commands are really helpful. And then yes, learning the context. And if anyone's ever seen me do a demo of Copilot, if I'm not using the shorthand commands, I literally have notes next to me of what to ask Copilot because I know how it's going to behave because
Mm.
I've done it so many times.
Hmm.
Whereas if I just change how I word a question, it will completely change the output,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's crazy.
So
So,
in that line, rolling out Copilot within an organization, I see a number of people or companies that we work for just buy the license and then well wish for the best, or but what I also hear is that it requires also more or less a cultural transformation. So how do you see that? Is it just switching on and then off you go, or is there more more method approach process that you like to follow there?
Yeah, and to add to that, maybe before you answer is, um, well, from a management decision, it might, oh, we just buy this tool. It's quite an investment if you have a large developer community, but that will improve developer productivity by X%, right? So that's their expectation when adding such a tool into their portfolio of tools that they supply to the developers. But then the developers get the tool, and that's it. They have to figure it out themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put on my DevOps hat here, my DevOps experience. Whenever we've invested in a tool, anytime in tech, someone either in the senior leadership team, the executive team have told us we're going to embrace it, or someone's made a change. They always think it's the magic bullet, but then you don't have the cultural buy-in. And the cultural side of it is going to be 80%. The tool is just 10% of it. The cultural side is 80% of it. The process is another portion, right? It's the same thing with any kind of change in an organization. There has to be a change in how we operate to make this tool work. So with things like AI, it depends on what type of AI you're using, but we'll use GitHub Copilot as an example. So to enable GitHub Copilot, someone has to license it and turn it on. So effectively, if you're part of an organization and let's say there's 100 developers, 100 engineers, and they assign 100 licenses, as an engineer, you have to install it yourself. Or it has to be installed in like a dev container in your, in your development environments, et cetera, so that everyone has it. But you can't force someone to turn it on. So number one, you have to encourage people. You have to incentivize them. So again, creating that community, like whether it's a Slack channel or some kind of team calls to say, hey, how are you all getting on with it? And then a lot of the organizations are using various metrics to measure success. So yes, we do get a lot of people like, yeah, I've used Copilot, I can do better. Absolutely. But then they, like you said before, they use it one and done, and then they don't care. Oh, I could do it better. Well, sure. I'm sure, René, you could write something better than I can, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stop doing it. I'm going to iterate and improve my process a little bit. So when we have the buy-in, we always say to people, measure time of tasks. So there's some great ways you can look at how the impact of the adoption of the tool works and how the culture changes work. But something really simple you can do is take a task, have an engineer perform it without Copilot on their own, and then measure the time it takes them with Copilot with that exact same task and see time saved. And in the beginning, it's going to be obviously like any new tool, a little bit of trial and error, how it works, where they find it successful. Maybe it's better for a certain type of task or not another, and then give them the space to play. As with any tool, writing any code, give them the space to play, get the feedback, iterate, and work in a way that encourages people to play and to use the tooling. And that really helps. And also, it's not a failure if it doesn't work the first time. Same thing with automation, right? We try to write automation scripts or we put things into CI/CD pipelines. Often they break the first time or the first 10 times. Sometimes the first 100 times we're writing new scripts.
Yes.
So it's about iterating and trial and error and then improving on that.
Yeah.
And the good part is it's on the very left of your development cycle, right? It's right in your IDE. So if it comes up with ideas that just don't compile or use syntax that doesn't even exist, you get it immediate feedback in your IDE, right? So okay, it came up with some random stuff that doesn't work. Okay, let's retry. Okay, what did it try to do? Maybe there's something similar. Maybe it had some old version of the script that I'm trying to use or the SDK that I'm trying to use. So maybe there it is onto something, but maybe we need to change some details. And what I like to do is also ask it questions back. So you came with this solution, but it doesn't work. It says this property does not exist, and how come? And then it will give you a better answer, right? So having that conversation with your rubber duck or assistant or however you call it, slowly can work from a completely not working solution into something that does work. And I think, yeah, if you're not open to having that discussion and just I want to ask it a question and it should always give me working results, that's not how development works, right? It's if it would work that way, then developers would become obsolete quite fast, right?
Yeah, and actually, that you're right. That would make us absolutely obsolete if everything worked the first time flawlessly.
Yeah. So I think that we're getting a little bit to the end, but I need to ask, and I don't want you to break any NDA or whatever. But where do you think we are going? And don't be too specific, of course, but like where is our industry when you look at it is going to? Because this is only the start, I think.
This is only the start. I can definitely say that we're embedding AI into the entire development lifecycle at GitHub, meaning from as soon as you touch your code to delivery, it's going to be there. We've already released quite a few features. I think we're going to see a lot more automation. I think, and I will say this from having been in cloud for a long time, the barriers to entry to cloud are really high. We're
Mm.
going to start lowering those barriers to entry without question, especially with AI. We're going to start enabling people to free up their or make better use of the time they do have to write code and make it better to communicate, to collaborate, and deliver that code at a much better rate. And I think when we talk to customers too about embracing DevOps practices, deploying to the clouds, any of the clouds, there is definitely a view to accelerate that, help people adopt that, and drive that. And I think we're going to see better adoption from folks, and AI is going to help us deliver better software and hopefully better apps with less bugs and less security flaws.
Yeah, and more collaboration. So actually, it's going to make us more human again.
Absolutely, that's the plan. And there's a lot of communication that takes place in software development, and communication's hard, right? So I think we're going to see a lot more platform-specific development enablement through GitHub and a lot of the other providers as well. But I think GitHub is focusing on the platform delivery end to end for the developer experience, and that includes everything from security, collaboration, automation, and underpinning that with AI.
Cool.
Do you also envision tools like this to know a bit more about business context? And actually, I foresee a future where, for example, looking at GitHub, there is a open source project, and someone creates an issue. I would like to add this feature, and then Jenny and I would read this issue, and they're like, I can do that, and it will create a pull request fixing that feature. I think we're not. In my head, we shouldn't be too far away from those kind of things. I don't want to want you let spoil anything or that you're working on it, but could you envision such things?
I think we've crossed the barrier now confidently that we can index your data and your code in private repositories, so we can provide better context as to how you as an organization would currently do that. So GitHub Copilot today can use, and I'll call it the private context in your repositories by creating what we call knowledge bases. So yes, that's not quite all the way there. There's ways we can automate it with actions, but I do see a future where not only just features, but bugs. And we do have that. We have it in GitHub Advanced Security today that will help you fix and address and tells you how to fix the issue. But you are still in control. So I think our next step will be it suggesting the fix or suggesting the feature. And then you as the developer will have to architect it and approve it. But we do have that with security, because security is a big overhead. And that's where we have some of the biggest issues in tech right now is we can develop code, we can do all these great things, but we're the humans making mistakes. So I think there's going to be a lot more of the capability to train on our code bases, make suggestions based off of our code bases, and then keeping that secure from day one. And I think that's really the direction we're really focusing on.
Yeah, it would be. You just sparked some ideas for me that normally when a developer writes some code and it starts committing that code and sharing it with others, you could also have AI ask it questions. Did you really mean to do these kind of things? Did you really? Because that doesn't have to be with security or anything in mind, but that would be the first things to do. It challenge you on certain things, like do a actual personal code review of the stuff that you did, and in a human way give you feedback on, hey, did you really wanted to do it this way, or you could also have used these kind of alternatives. Really having a human-like conversation with AI during your review, for example.
So I think we have the capability now to summarize a pull request. I would love to see that pull request make the suggestions where you're missing unit tests, et cetera. And I think it's very much at the forefront of GitHub's mind to help improve code suggestions. I think you'll see that coming as well. Again, we forget, we're the humans.
Yeah.
I think the statistic that was posted by, and I have to remember the name of the organization, but 96% of cloud breachers are human error, right? We're the problem, not the AI systems, because they have the barriers in place. So I think I would love to see more code suggestions. We do see it with security already, but I think, yeah, it's possible in the next while we'll see some introduction of code suggestions that maybe we forgot something. It's kind of like when you're writing an email now and you say to someone, hey, I've sent you an attachment. And then your email provider goes, did you forget that? And I think there's those little hints are really helpful, because you go, oh yeah, I forgot to attach the thing. So I think same thing in a code base. I forgot my unit test. I forgot or I left a secret. And we do have things in place now to expose secrets and to prevent those from getting exposed. So that's already there. I would love to see more snippets around, hey, did you think about this? Did you do this? Because sometimes we just forget.
Great.
Yeah, and one last remark. So it's not only reminding, like the email with the attachment. It's because it's more advanced. It can actually, did you forget your unit test? Oh, by the way, here's 5 unit tests that I wrote for you, right? So same with the email. So did you forget your attachment? Did you want to attach this attachment? So you only have to click yes, and then you're on your way, right? So having that knowledge everywhere, that is really adding value.
All right. I think this is it's already half an hour, so we need to wrap up. Are there any things that you want to give us away? Maybe some tips or inspiration on take a look at that, because that really gets you started. And then before we let you go.
I will definitely include a link for the space framework that we use at GitHub that shows people how we adopt and measure success with Copilot. It's how we measure success internally at GitHub Engineering with Copilot. So I will share that with everyone. My advice to everyone is give it a shot. And one of the best things about trying something new is you might be pleasantly surprised, right? Try something new. And I always say to people to stay relevant, stay on top of your education, continue learning, never stop learning. And, anything could happen. We could all be out of careers for a number of reasons, not just AI, something else down the road. Old age, not that I'm getting older, but I might be, or just, we're the new generation coming in is 100 times smarter than us, right? So keeping yourself relevant, keeping yourself educated to what's out there, and being willing to learn, always be willing to learn is my number one advice to anyone, because my career has pivoted so many times. It's not been a straight line. And I always encourage people to just keep learning, because you also might just get bored of doing the same thing you've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you very much, April.
All right. Thank you both for having me.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So this was the Lead Podcast. Hope to see you next time. Speak to you again.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.